Welcome to day 159 on the trail. We have three readings for today. From 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 1 through chapter 3 verse 23, Joshua 9 verse 1 through 10:43, and 2 Maccabees chapter 1 verses 18 through 36. In our reading from Joshua chapter 10 today, we find an interesting bit of poetry tucked into the victory of Joshua and Israel over a coalition of 5 kings of the Amorites. Beginning in Joshua 10, verses 12 through 15. On the day when the Lord gave the Amorites over to the Israelites, Joshua spoke to the Lord, and he said in the sight of Israel, "Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and the moon in the valley of Ajalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nations took vengeance on their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Yashar? The sun stopped in mid-heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. There has been no day like it before or since, when the Lord heeded a human voice, for the Lord fought for Israel. As an aerospace engineer whose work involves orbital mechanics, this passage raises a few interesting questions. For example, did the Earth stop rotating so the sun stood still? Also, if the sun stood still in the mid-heaven, we would assume this was around noon. So how was the moon also visible? There is an interesting theological question here as well. In Genesis 1, the author is very careful not to name the sun and moon, since they were often worshipped as deities by surrounding nations. Instead, in Genesis chapter 1 verse 16 we find, God made the 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. Instead of using the names sun and moon, as we found in Joshua, the author here in Genesis 1 refers to the heavenly bodies simply as the greater and lesser lights. Therefore, some scholars ask, is Joshua directly addressing the sun and moon? And if so, does this imply some indirect form of validation to the sun and moon as heavenly deities? Now, while there is no definitive answer to all of these questions I've just asked, it is quite possible that the poetic section that we find in verse 12 of Joshua was taken from a longer poem that has since been lost to the sands of time. In fact, the author makes reference to the book of Yashar, which is no longer available to us. Therefore, we do not have the larger context for this poetic line or why it may have been included here in Joshua. Now, regarding the theological question regarding the sun and moon, notice that the writer carefully avoids attributing any divine function to the sun and moon. Instead, Joshua asks God directly to lengthen the day, so that his army has time to rout the enemy. We see this at the beginning of the passage in verse 10, and again at the end in verse 14. Now, as to the nature of the miracle described in verses 12 through 13, there is no lack of speculative debate. The root of the Hebrew word that is used here, damam, can mean to be motionless or to be silent. Therefore, some have suggested that either the sun did not shine or was hidden, as by an eclipse. However, this interpretation makes little sense in the context of the passage. After all, the entire reason for Joshua's prayer is to provide additional time for the armies of Israel to destroy their enemies. Darkness would have done just the opposite. Instead, it is best to read the passage as translated here in the New Revised Standard Version. The sun and moon stood still to provide Joshua with the additional help that he needed from God. Now, how this occurred, or the exact meaning of this passage, will probably never be discovered. Nevertheless, there are 2 central points being made by the author that are very clear. First, Joshua, as Israel's new leader, is a faithful man of prayer, and God hears and responds to his prayer. Second, God is the one who gives the victory to Israel, even against overwhelming odds, as we saw in the stories of the Battle of Jericho and Ai. In response, The readers are called to remember that true victory is only found in faithfully trusting God and His promises. Instead of trusting in well-designed battle plans or the size and strength of gathered armies, we are to focus on trusting God and following His instructions for our lives. Turning now to our reading from 1 Corinthians. In chapter 3, Paul is addressing the divisions and factions that have emerged within the Corinthian church. As we read in chapter 1 and was reiterated at the end of chapter 3, the Christians in Corinth are making claims to have been baptized by Paul, or Apollos, or Cephas, and this was creating dissensions and fracturing the community. Therefore, Paul appeals to their unity in Christ. In 1 Corinthians 3, beginning in verse 10, "According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building on it. Each builder must choose with care how to build it. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one that has been laid. That foundation is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, the work of each builder will become visible, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed with fire. And the fire will test what sort of work each has done. If what has been built on the foundation survives, the builder will receive a reward. If the work is burned up, the builder will suffer loss. The builder will be saved, but only as through fire." As Paul clearly states, there is one church, not a variety of flavors based on generational attachments or personal preferences. There is one church whose only foundation is Jesus. So, as followers of Jesus, Paul says that we build on that singular foundation. However, what materials will we choose to build with? Gold, silver, stone, wood, hay? That is, what effort and with what quality of materials do we build on that foundation? Do we build with what is excellent or expedient? This is a critical question because ultimately what we build will be tested with fire. If we choose to build with straw or wood, we may be able to build a cost-effective structure. Hay bales stack quickly. But when God puts a match to it, will what we have built stand? Or will it be quickly engulfed by flames? Also, as I reflect on this passage, I think of those who follow after us. Are the materials that we are using and the structures that we are building with today providing a strong and lasting legacy upon which the next generation can continue to build? Are we building a community of faith that they will want to be a part of, and more importantly, will be willing to contribute to? After all, the work is not ours to complete, but we are to do our best to provide quality materials with which to continue the work which Jesus has given us. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, stay on the trail.